Welcome to Insights, Ideal's free monthly webinar series, specially designed for parents and families of gifted or twice exceptional learners. In each session, our expert presenters provide homeschooling families with strategies to help their exceptional students thrive. We're delighted to have you with us. And remember, your support through donations is always appreciated.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming. It's great to see so many faces. I'm Dr. Mary Grace Stewart, Chief Academic Officer of Ideal for Gifted, an online program of learning and belonging for advanced, gifted, and twice exceptional children and youth. We are most fortunate to have with us Dr. Joseph Renzulli. Dr. Renzulli is a professor emeritus at the University of Connecticut. He's been a pioneer in gifted education since the 1970s. His innovative strategies like the three-ring conception of giftedness and the enrichment triad model have literally transformed the field of gifted education by applying gifted education principles and practices to all students. He is recognized as one of the top 25 most influential psychologists in the world by American Psychological Association. He has consulted for the White House Task Force on Education of Gifted and Talented and received the prestigious Harold W. McGraw Jr. Award, which is known to be the Nobel Prize of Education. It is my honor and privilege to introduce my mentor and friend, Dr. Joseph S. Renzulli. Hi, Joe. Thank you for being here.
It's my great honor and pleasure to be with my good friend Mary Grace, and I'm happy to try to answer your questions as best I can.
Thank you so much. Well, we're going to be talking to parents, and I know that you're a dad of a few really bright kiddos. So here we go. Put on your dad hat as well as your professor hat. I've often had parents say to me when they call, they'll say, I don't know if my kid is gifted, but, and since today we're mainly talking to parents, could you please describe your concept of giftedness? Because they're not sure if their child is gifted or not.
Let me begin by saying that there are really two types of gifted, and I tend to use the word more as an adjective than a noun. But there's, first of all, what I call schoolhouse or lesson learning gifted or high IQ gifted. And obviously, those are the things that a great deal of focus in our field has been on. The second is what I call creative productive giftedness. And that's a little bit different. It doesn't mean a lot about what your IQ says. It has a lot to do with what your creativity is all about and what your task commitment is all about, your willingness to work long and hard on a topic. And I think that when I talk to parents, oftentimes they get an IQ of 130 and they say, my child's gifted. Well, let's just for a minute pretend that your child gets an IQ of 129. Does that mean they're no longer gifted? So it's not like eye color. You have blue eyes or brown eyes or green eyes. It's not something that is that clear or that simple. One of my favorite studies that I did over the years was a study of twins and all kinds of twins, identical, fraternal, mixed boys and girls, and all of that. And one of the interesting things that came out of that study when I interviewed parents was what they said about, in this case, it was a twin selected and not selected for a gifted program in a
Mm.
small city in Connecticut, a suburban town and city in Connecticut. And I'll never forget one parent saying to me, well, there's only one problem. And I said, what's that? And she said, they've got the wrong damn twin. One twin was in the gifted program and the other was not because her IQ score was not 130. And then she told me all the creative things she designs and makes her own clothing. She writes her own poetry and music, is learning how to play three different instruments, which she all loves. And so I think we really can't make those clear-cut distinctions. And again, one of the reasons that when people ask me, what's the purpose of gifted education programs, I talk about the development and application of gifted behaviors, thinking analytically, thinking critically, thinking outside the box, the kinds of things the people that we respect in this world have done, the Thomas Edisons, the Steven Spielbergs, the people Oprah Winfrey's, people that have gone on to make some kind of contribution to their field. And if you read, I'm a great reader of biographies, and I've studied biographies a long time before I came up with the three-ring conception of giftedness. And it was certainly they were above average ability in something, whether it was lesson learning or above average ability in playing music or writing poetry or designing clothing or building with Lego blocks. Um, but they also had a very, very strong interest in a particular topic, one that they were willing to work long and hard on. And so I believe that it's not as clear cut a thing as IQ scores tell us. Again, if you're a parent listening today and your child is in the gifted program because their IQ score was 130 or above, just imagine if it were a few points below. Would that make your child ungifted? So, again, as Mary Grace mentioned earlier, one of my goals with the enrichment triad model is to provide general enrichment services to all students. We want to see if we can turn on any light bulbs through what I call types 1 and 2 enrichment. And then when we see a child that becomes very interested, they revolve into what we call type 3 enrichment. And type 3 enrichment is the young person thinking, feeling, and doing like the practicing professional, even if it's at a more junior level than a scientist from Harvard or somebody that is appearing on in a television movie. They're doing what the big guys do, but at a more junior level. And so this is one of the reasons that I have developed a number of alternative approaches and instruments for looking at young people, not to see if they're gifted or not gifted, but what their interests are, how they like to learn, and how they like to express themselves. The series of instruments, my instruments that are the most popular, called interestalizers. I can create or find an interest in a young person. I can take that young person much further along in their development than if I just teach the same thing to everybody. So type 1 enrichment might consist of field trips. It might consist of something as a teacher reading a book to kids or showing them a video or having them visit a library. And now with the internet, you can visit every major library in the world right from the comfort of your own home. We've also built this into a technology program. So forgive the name, the University of Connecticut funded our research on it. They called it Renzulli Learning. But the first thing that they do is answer a series of questions, those three things I just mentioned to you, and that produces an electronic profile of that child. There is, by the way, a parent version of this, and Mary Grace will send you information. The um, the second thing that happens is that a very sophisticated artificial intelligence computer program reads the child's profile and then it finds resources just for that child, again, based on their interests, their learning styles, and their preferred modes of expression. So this is true personalization. We recommend it for all students. If you have one child home that is, quote, gifted and one not, don't you want that other child to have some experiences that get them and turned on, engaged and excited in the learning process?
Absolutely. So let me recap a little bit. The three parts of looking for the gifted behaviors are above average at doing something, um, being really deeply internally motivated to do an interest area, and kind of an outside of the box way of thinking. Is that the three?
Yeah, create what we call creativity. And that
Yeah.
is basically, think of it this way, asking young people questions that do not have single predetermined correct answers. And the kinds of things that that does is it turns on kids to coming up with ideas. And I think that those are the kinds of things that really develop the kinds of minds. Again, as I said, my goal of gifted education is develop the skills in young people that make the world a better place, that improve our economy, our culture, our social life, our arts, our everything. And those are the people that history has recognized as gifted.
Yeah, definitely. So you're saying also that if a parent is sort of just around the house with their child, um, and the child is really, really, really into something, then that should pique the parent. Hmm. Yes. If they're really extraordinary at building Legos, or they teach themselves how to play the piano and spend an hour on that, or is that the kind of thing parents are
Yeah, parents,
absorbed?
and most of my work has been with teachers, but parents can do the same kinds of things. They can find some resources. And again, with the internet, they're all out there, most of them free. And we can take a child to a certain site. My little almost six granddaughter has been very interested in turtles. And so last week, we took her to the Mystic Aquarium where they have a great display and they can go in and they can actually watch turtles and pet turtles and all of those kinds of things. I think getting children books. One of the things that's a favorite of mine, developed by my wife, Dr. Sally Reese, is a reading interestalizer. Find out what kinds of books young people read. School prescribes most of the books. When I was in school, there was a library at the back of the room, the fifth grade library, and that's where you had to take a book from, whether you liked it or not. Nowadays, we can get a book from anywhere in the world. Just go on Amazon, you know, put in even a topic. You can also get thinking skills activities. If you look at a thing that I developed called the Type 2 Enrichment Matrix. Type 2 is, Type 1 is exposing kids to different ideas. Type 2 is teaching them how to study those ideas. And you can put in something like analytic thinking or creative thinking or multimedia ways of expressing yourself. Just type that in and you'll get all kinds of resources. And I think that's what parents should be doing. But always, always, always when the child expresses an interest in that,
Mhm.
whether it's a self-made interest or an interest that your teachers or you help create by, again, taking them on a field trip or having them look at a video. To me, interest is the start of everything that develops what I call gifted adjective, gifted behaviors.
So the type ones, they're exploring. I call it weird, wacky, and wonderful.
Yeah, I
Would
love it.
be a fair estimation, but it might not be in their interest that they're exploring. They could be exploring anything, right?
Absolutely.
So just go fun places, do fun things. So you mentioned creativity. do you mean children who are strong in the arts, or is it something broader?
Creativity can be applied to any field of knowledge or activity, even to sports. We've had coaches that have asked, we use the man that started basketball as our example. We've asked them how they might modify a particular game to make it either fun or faster or easier to score. And they've come up with some really good ideas.
That's awesome. So we often think of gifted or twice exceptional being academic, but could you be like a really gifted plumber?
Farmers, certainly. And I think that we have many, many examples of that over the years of farmers who learned that plowing in curves rather than straight rows was better for whatever irrigation they were using, and different kinds of fertilizer and different times to plant. And so I do think that there's always opportunities for trying out something new. They may not always, seldom always work. That's what really has advanced our culture, our society, our economy.
So you mentioned about the IQ test. One of the other questions that I get a lot is, should I have my child tested? And it always makes me wonder, but what would you say?
Well, I think if one person, if you really feel like you need to get your child certified as quote gifted, because those are the regulations of the State Department of Education in your state or district, I think that certainly that information is valuable, but I also believe any other skills. And as a matter of fact, right now we're working on a research study to add a fourth area of skills to our interest, preferred learning methods and expression
Hmm.
style, and that's executive function skills. These have become very, very popular in the business world and the world at large. And things like planning, organization, effective communication with other people, being able to express yourself to different kinds of audiences. And so that will eventually be added into our technology profile. And again, we're developing some instruments, paper and pencil type instruments that will look at executive function skills. We've already got some drafts. We're just doing some research on everything we do is based on research studies.
Yeah.
Because people always say, well, that's a pretty good idea, Mr. Renzulli, but do you have some data on that? That's the way of trying to put you off. So every instrument we develop, it's all published. You can look at it.
Well, that brings up an interesting thing about twice exceptional kiddos. So a lot of times I hear from parents, well, my kid is really, really strong at this, but they're really, really not good at executive function types thing. They're not organized, and they're maybe not great at communicating, but they're still very strong and very committed and very driven and very creative. So is executive function something that can be learned?
Oh, I definitely can, but it can't be learned through the teaching and preaching method. I think you learn it best by being involved in a project. And then a parent or a teacher looking over your shoulder might give some suggestions. No, I think you should do this before that, or I think you should look at this audience instead of this audience, so that there is some guidance needed. But the John Dewey said 100 years ago, we learn by doing. And you can learn executive function skills by having a project, an individual or small group project, where their skills are necessary to make the project move forward.
I remember, I think one time you said interests trump everything.
Yeah.
And I remember that thinking, oh, what's he mean by that? Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Like, are you saying that the executive function is more likely to get learned if they're doing something that they need it for?
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons why I've developed a number of instruments, that the Interstellizer series. As a matter of fact, I have them from primary age students. I even have one for children applying to my graduate program because I want to know the kinds of things that I can do to personalize our grad program that accommodates the things that they have strong interest in. If they have strong interest in twice exceptional or underachievement or dual language bright children, then I can look for resources or steer them in the direction that fosters and supports those interests.
You mean you actually practice what you preach?
Absolutely.
I
I,
know you.
my hobby is bread baking. And one of the things that I do, I have a lot of websites and I get emails from King Arthur's baking company in Vermont almost daily. And I try different kinds of bread. I take online bread courses, and I've got every bread making book that God ever made. And you know what? It's really funny. My wife said, I can always tell when you're in a good mood because you get up in the morning and say, I think I'm going to bake a loaf of baguettes today, or some loaves of baguettes today, or something like that. So we're not happy doing things that other people want us to do, but we are happy when we're doing something we want to do.
Well, that brings me to something that you've been talking about in the past few years, which is enjoyment, engagement, and enrichment. So tell me
Enjoy-
more about that enjoyment piece.
Enjoyment, engagement, and enthusiasm for learning.
Enthusiasm.
Yeah, the three E's. Well, enjoyment always leads the list. Again, you know from examples, I just gave my bread baking example. You enjoy doing something that you're getting pleasure from, that makes you feel creative, that makes you feel happy, that makes you, I have a group of friends that as soon as I produce something online, I photograph it and send it out to them, and they send theirs back to me. You might remember our faculty member, Rachel McAnally. As soon as she comes up with a new bread, I get a photograph of it and the recipe. I've even got a folder on my desk, Rachel's recipes.
Well, are you saying that enjoyment leads to engagement?
Yeah, I do believe that's why there's a little arrow in the big 3E diagram. There's a little
Okay.
arrow going from enjoyment down to engagement. Engagement is probably the hardest thing in the world to define. I like to define it this way. Think of the first time that you fell in love with someone or a pet dog or a hobby. Your whole body chemistry changes. You're a different person when you're in that sort of mindset. And then that arrow points down to enthusiasm for learning. Then you want to learn more about it. And so I guess that the three E's are really a way of summarizing, in a sense, my life's work.
Wow. Your life's work in 3 words or less. That's pretty awesome. Well, I have to tell you, Joe, that the first time I heard you speak, which I think was like in 1997, that's what caused me to do what I'm doing today. This is what gives me joy, and I have a lot of enthusiasm for it, and I'm very engaged in it. So people ask me, well, what do you do for fun? I say, teach gifted kids. I teach twice exceptional kids. I get to play with them all the time. So I should thank you for that. We now have some questions from parents that wrote in, and I'll shoot those to you if that's okay.
It's fine.
All right. So one mom says, does a child have to be smart at everything to be gifted, or are there different kinds of gifted? Well, you sort of answered the 2 kinds.
Oh, absolutely. I think that if we think of people who the world considers gifted, It's because they worked in a particular, almost single area. Any Nobel Prize winner won the Nobel Prize because of the neurons that she or he was working on, or the literature or the poetry that she or he was writing. And so that I think it's that's why I don't want to confuse lesson learning giftedness, being a good student, which I am
Mhm.
fully supportive of. I don't want to confuse that with creative, productive giftedness.
Got it. One parent says, "What does twice exceptional mean?"
Well, it's young people who have some sort of learning problem or disability, but they're also smart. Now, unfortunately, in education, we have a habit of looking at deficits and trying to correct them. My friend Del Sigley talks about be a deficit, don't be a deficit detector. Well, what's the other half of that? Be a talent scout. And I think that if we're always just looking at deficits and trying to um, fix them, we're going to leave out some of the kinds of opportunities in the child's area of strength and interest. We
Mm.
had a young person in a school that I was working with a number of years ago, and he was one of the creative activities was writing captions for cartoons. He couldn't, he wasn't very good at it. So what he
Mm.
started to do was draw his own cartoons and then give them a caption. And he became the a cartoonist for his school newspaper. He came to the University of Connecticut and became the cartoonist for our campus daily, and even had some of his cartoons published in our local state newspaper, Hartford Current. And it was all because we focused on his strength, which was designing the cartoon. And then sometimes he had friends who helped him write the caption, but his artistic talent was remarkable. So it's very specific areas where people show strength. Yeah, there are some people that show it across two or three areas, or even many areas, but they're very few and far between.
Well, as parents, I think that's also true that we want to be talent spotters, not deficit detectors, because honestly, as a parent, I felt like I was worried that my second child wasn't what they weren't doing. And my husband was much better at focusing on the strengths. And so I think that's a thing for parents as well, to play to their strength. And then they'll find that they need the other things as they um, are working on something else. Yes?
Yeah, Ali mentioned in the last presentation that we have a daughter who has some learning disabilities, and
Mm.
one of the things we found out is that she would look at something on the news or something that's happened, and she would want to sort of argue about it. She was in she was in high school. We sent her to a debate camp at Northwestern University. Interestingly enough, her sister ended up going to Northwestern. She went to Union College in New York. But anyway, we were up visiting her one time, and we met the admission officer from Union College. And she said, "Oh, Sarah, I know her. As a matter of fact, I read her application letter and she followed through. And that's why we admitted her." And she said, "I noticed in studying Union College that you do not have a debate club. I plan to start one, and in 2 years, we will be doing debates with other universities around the country." Well, it turned out that happened, and she was literally driving the van that took kids to other universities. So I can't emphasize the importance again of looking for what could be a strength. Even now, if she comes over now and looks at the room with those pillows on the floor, she'll say, "Dad, what the hell did you do in here today?"
Well, the next question that comes, I think is a really, really important question for our profession as a whole. I think this is a mom, it doesn't say, but it goes like this. It really feels like the gifted program at our school is just for rich white kids. We aren't them, but our kids are gifted too. Is there any kind of program that actually looks out for Black and brown kids and makes sure they get the same opportunities?
You're talking about the single biggest problem and challenge that exists in our field today. And there are a lot of people working on it, very good people. And I think that one of the kinds of things that I have tried to emphasize is that if we provide good, especially type 1 experiences for all children, that's why in my diagram of the enrichment triad model, I have brackets around type 1 and type 2, the top two halves of the rectangle. And outside the brackets, it says for all students. I also have inside that bracket on the right-hand side enrichment clusters. And enrichment clusters are gatherings of children who have an interest in a particular area that come together usually once a week, with kind of running in 8 week cycles, because they have a particular interest, regardless of what their scores are. And again, remember that when we turn kids on to type 1, then they'll want to learn the skills of how to interview the city mayor. And then they'll want to go out, that's a type 2, go out and interview the city mayor about why we
Yeah.
don't have more safe playgrounds for children. So I think that that's one of the ways that I have tried to get more Black, brown, dual language kids in some kinds of services. It's the stimulation, the skills, and the follow through. Um, and so that's one of the things that I believe we can do in schools that serve minority kids.
Well,
Ermin, go ahead.
one more that is in another category, and that's about toddlers. Um, I have a toddler that loves to go through the thin pages of the dictionary one at a time. She's super sensitive to loud sounds like the roar of the MGM lion on a movie. She sits for hours and watches Mary Poppins. I haven't been about to find a lot. I haven't been able to find a lot about gifted and little kids. Are there those things? And do you have any advice about toddlers?
Well, I think that toddlers probably are a great way to start. It's what young kids do at an early age that develops interests. And
Mm.
I think that even today, Sally's not here because she's taking our almost six granddaughter to look at some mansions in Newport because in some story or other that she read about, he asked a question about that. And she said, and Sally said, would you like to visit there? Oh, yes, Grammy, I'd love to go there. So I do think that uh, following through on interest in toddlers is important. And this
Mm.
really is where reading to young toddlers is very, very important, because I think that stories from books are the way that we can turn them on to an idea that they might like to learn more about.
Well, this has been awesome. And I really, really appreciate your being here. And I just want to say that I feel, and maybe I'm biased because you were my professor, but when I heard about the school-wide enrichment model, I felt that's the ethical way to go, because type ones exploring things are for everybody. Everybody
Absolutely.
should have the opportunity. And type twos are, what do you need to know for your interests and your strength areas? And I felt like that's for everybody, particularly in the enrichment clusters. Anybody could make a group of people, and parents could have a pod of kids who all love Legos and have them over.
Yeah.
I
One
I
of
think
the
that's something that
saddest
we parents can
If
encourage.
there's nothing. One of the saddest days of my life was I was visiting a school in Connecticut, and an announcement came over the speaker, and it said, uh, "Will the gifted students meet in the library right now in order to go to the aquarium? We have a wonderful aquarium here in Mystic, Connecticut." And I thought to myself, "Oh my God, wouldn't all kids love to go to the aquarium?" And I just went and found the director of the gifted program and I said, "Do you think that you could do something that would get all of the children there, even if it's in a cycle of over several weeks where one or two classrooms at a time?" The aquarium is something that could turn on light bulbs in kids' heads who never would be considered to be quote unquote gifted. I think that, when I sum up my work, I say that is school-wide enrichment. Um, it's nothing more than a bunch of organized common sense. I don't want my kid not to be able to go to the aquarium because they didn't meet a certain cutoff score. That's nothing but short of stupid. And we got to be very careful of that in our field because there's a lot of criticism of our field that we're fighting off all the time. I don't know if you know what's called the drowning man analogy, but I'll use it. And uh, two people are walking along the river,
Mm.
and there's a man out there in the river drowning, and one of them jumps in. The other one says, "Hey, I'm not doing that." The other one jumps in and tries to bring the person to shore, but in the process, the man slips from his grip and drowns. Who's going to go to court? The man that stood on the bank and did nothing, or the person who struggled but wasn't able to do the job?
So let us all as parents struggle, even if we're not sure if we can do the job.
Well,
Thank you so much, Joe.
let me just elaborate on that. A
Yes,
lot of a lot of superintendents say, I don't want all of that parent annoyance and demands and this and that. So we're just going to do away with the gifted program. We're going to get rid of it. We're going to eliminate it. And I think that that's a step in the wrong direction because I think, again, the school-wide enrichment helps to take care of those things for all kids.
yeah. I've often said that it's not about giftedness or twice exceptionality. It's about the identification process that's used that's not fair. And if the door was open, I've often had principals or superintendents say to me, well, aren't those things good for all kids? And I say, yeah, they are. So let's do it. And
Yeah.
then and then they're sort of stuck. But they're like, well, we can't do that. We can't take everybody. Um, they're overwhelmed by the idea. But I think as parents, um, we could we can do some things that would support our kids in their developing of their interests and their abilities. Even maybe if the program is not, or if I'm in Massachusetts and we only have like 3 programs in the whole state, but
Yeah,
I would love to just say, yeah, go ahead, do it for everybody.
I want to give you a personal example. And I think that this should really be an important role for parents. When you find out that the interest is more than just a passing fancy because of something the child saw on TV, then start to do some things that are going to further that interest. Our almost 6-year-old granddaughter has been taking piano lessons. And immediately, her mother said, "Oh, let's get her a stand-up keyboard." And Sally said, "No, let's wait for a couple more weeks and see if she really sticks with this. And in fact, Abby now knows that at some point, if she really likes learning piano, she's going to get for her birthday coming up next month a stand-up keyboard. And so I think that make sure that it's something that will get legs rather than just, again, something that is a quick and passing interest, and the next day the child won't even remember what it was all about. And once that happens, all the kinds of resources, as long as you keep the first E always up front, enjoyment. Are they enjoying it, or are they doing it because you want to make them do it?
Mhm. I have a lot of stories in my childhood that go like that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Joe. Wish I could give you a hug, but virtually that's not real possible. So, um,
I'll send you two things. Uh,
okay.
uh, List of instruments, and then a number of things that I'm writing today, which I call short stuff, which deals with sometimes controversial, but certainly uh, topics that are on people's minds. And
Mhm.
I think that parents might be interested in some of those. They're not going to read a 26-page article on that I've written on alternative assessment. So, but there's a short piece in there on that. I've shrunk wrapped them a little, some of my more popular articles, and so I'll send those two things to you right after we get off.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
My
And
great pleasure being with you all, and I keep the faith.
okay, we will. We'll keep leaning forward. Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.